Welcome back. We've been looking at the story of the wise and foolish builder. One man built his house on the rock and the other one decides to build his house directly on the sand. When the storm comes along, we find out which one was the wise builder. It's only the house that was built on the rock that was able to stand. Now, both men wanted to build houses. They had hopes and dreams of achieving something, but they make different choices and they end up with very different results. One is successful and of course the other one isn't. Now, that's got me starting to think about things that have gone wrong for me. Maybe I've made certain choices or decisions and it hasn't worked out the way that I hoped. Sometimes I have made really bad choices and I've got myself into very difficult situations. One story I go back to is something that happened to me when I was quite young, probably about 6 years old, maybe 7 years old. My mum and dad had decided to buy a brand new carpet for our living room. It was quite an expensive one and it looked really nice. But as soon as this new carpet had been put down, it made the rest of the room look scruffy. So they decided that they needed to redecorate. Now in those days they went down to the shop and the shopkeeper said he would deliver the paint and then they could pay him then. And later on that afternoon there was a knock at the door and the man was there with the paint and the paint was brought into the sitting room. Now I was told to leave these pots of paint alone whilst my mum and dad went out to pay the man for the paint. Whilst they were out the room, I decided, well, to play with these pots of paint. Maybe I thought I was being helpful, but I started to stack the pots of paint up. And sure enough, the big pot of paint at the top fell off and the lid came off and white paint went all over this brand new carpet. Oh no! I knew I was for it and I dived behind the settee. Just for a moment, I want you to think about this. How do you feel when things go wrong? How does that make you feel? Have a think. Maybe you could talk about it together in your class or in your group.
So in our story, we have two men who both wanted to build a house. One was successful and the other wasn't. So let's just pretend that they were brothers. And one day their parents turned up after a storm and they found one house still standing and the other house was just a pile of bricks. I wonder what they thought. I wonder what they said. Just take a moment to think about that.
Anyway, back to my story. There I was hiding behind the sofa and my mum and dad come into the living room and it's devastation. There was white paint poured all across their brand new carpet. Well, it only took a few seconds to find me hiding behind the sofa and I was dragged out and I was told off big time and sent up to my room and told that I was not going to have anything to eat for the rest of the day. And I spent a few hours up there sobbing. I was so sorry for what I had done. I had done exactly what my parents had told me not to. I had played with the paint and now I had ruined their brand new carpet. But a little while later there was a knock at the door and my mum said I could come down and have something to eat. Yes, of course, they were really angry with what I had done, but that didn't mean that they stopped loving me. So let's think about the mum and dad turning up, finding their son sitting amongst all the rubble. They must have had all sorts of emotions and feelings. They may have been really annoyed that he had done something so stupid by trying to build a house directly on sand. But at the same time, they still loved their son, and they would have been very concerned about him as well. It would be good just to take a moment to think about how and why the mum and dad still loved their son. Things go wrong, don't they? We all make mistakes. It's not very nice at the time, and sometimes there can be consequences, especially if we've done something wrong. We might end up being grounded for 2 weeks. Now, Christians believe there are some important things to learn from this story about the two builders. Whenever we look at one of these stories that Jesus told, there's one thing that always remains the same. Whatever the actions or choices that people make, whether they are successful or if they fail, they always remain loved by God. It's like the story of the lost sheep. The lost sheep was loved even though it had wandered off. Jesus told these stories to get people to think. So let's think for a moment about this man who built his house on the sand. If you were one of his friends, what would you like to say to him?
It's really important to remember that if we make a mistake, it doesn't actually change who we are. We're still important, we're still loved, and we're still significant. But if we're wise, we will learn from our mistakes. Think about our little man. He built his house on the sand. Wonder what Jesus would have said to him. Do you think he might do things differently next time? And if so, why?